healthcare. Raise the fare. We want healthcare.
Raise the fare.
Raise the fare. We want healthcare. Raise the fare. We want healthcare. Raise the fare. We want healthcare. Raise the fare. We want healthcare.
Raise the fare. We want healthcare. We'll never be defeated.
The drivers united.
We'll never be defeated.
The drivers united will never be defeated.
Raise the fare. Please the lease.
Raise the fare. Please the lease.
Raise the fare.
Please the lease.
Raise the fare.
Please the lease.
Raise the fare.
Please the lease.
Raise the fare.
Please the lease.
Raise the fare.
Please the lease.
Raise the fare.
Please the lease.
Raise the fare.
Please the lease.
Raise the fare.
Please the lease.
Stop the overcharging.
Right now.
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 TLC.
Do the right thing.
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 Raise the lease.
Raise the fare.
The drivers united.
We'll never be defeated.
The drivers united.
We'll never be defeated.
Okay, brothers, it's time to go upstairs.
Let's go.
Upstairs to the 19th floor.
Commissioners, the next item on the agenda is two rules having to do with the fares and lease caps. And before calling for a vote, I know many of you commissioners, perhaps all, will wish to be heard on this. So I will introduce the topic, and then we will have an opportunity for people to make statements, and then we will have a vote. Let me just say that we are here today to do our job, commissioners, and any decision that the government makes where they set a number, there are people who want it higher, people who want it lower, and I do acknowledge that, and I know that it means that we have heard over the last days and weeks from the very zealous advocates for different segments of the industry, and I know that it's something that comes with the job. I would say here, colleagues, we have done a good job. I think we can vote proudly on the fare increase that is before us today, and that's the core of what we're voting on, is the fare. That fare has been the same for 6 years, and now that's good for consumers, for passengers. It's good that we've held it down, and I know that there are a lot of drivers in the room today, and they might feel like they've had to wait way too long. On the other side of that are customers, and I say proudly, I think it's good that we can give customers stability and predictability in the price over that period of time. But certainly the time comes when you have to raise the fare, And it is clear to me that that time has come. The numbers are clear, they're indisputable, they are stark. Over the past 6 years, gas is up. It is taking now nearly $40 out of every taxi driver's shift to pay for gasoline. Credit card processing is up, taking nearly $8 out of every taxi driver's shift. When you add that up, a taxi driver today is taking home $130 for a 12-hour shift. That's the core number here, plain and simple. $130 for 12 hours of difficult labor. I think that it is time for a raise. And I think passengers understand that. I have been very gratified that in the public debate since this fare increase proposal was put forward, the public reaction has been, in my view, overwhelmingly that passengers are prepared to pay more so that the taxi driver can earn a decent living. You know, New Yorkers are practical, they are compassionate, they're also smart, long-term thinkers who understand that if you have an industry based on a workforce not earning enough to put food on the table, then that's not a stable situation. And if we want the industry to continue to thrive as it has, which is in the interest of the owners, the passengers, and the drivers, then we have to deal with the fare. And what this does would allow, after this fare increase, a driver will be earning some $160, $170 per shift. Not going to get rich that way, but enough at least, I believe, to pay the rent and put food on the table. So it is time. In addition, for the first time, we are establishing a health and disability fund for drivers. Taxi drivers, as considered to be independent contractors. I appreciate the show of support for the proposal, but I will ask people to just show their opinions quietly throughout the proceeding here. Today, taxi driver getting from their in effect employer do not get health coverage, do not get disability coverage. At a minimum, today's proposal will get disability coverage to drivers. And I can't say enough how important I think that is. For a taxi driver today, taxi driver breaks an arm, a leg, can't drive, that driver is out of work. It's not like many office jobs or people work for larger companies where they can be shifted to another job while they're recovering. A taxi driver can't drive a car, he or she is out of work, income zero. So disability coverage is, and I'm not going to belabor it, but the number of times that I've gone to visit a driver who's been in an accident and is laid up at home, and there are children in that house who now have no income to put food on the table, I think this is a very important item. So, and again, ultimately, better for the public too, because the public can have a workforce that operates under those circumstances. Finally, very quickly, the other items on our agenda today are also good for the public. We are doing three things. One is changing the way credit cards are handled. Rather than drivers paying a percentage of every credit card fare, 5% today, they will pay a flat $10 fee per shift. Now, I don't know, I've got New York Magazine in my house, I'm proud to say, yesterday or the day before, and I opened a big 12-page spread on the taxi taker's crib sheet, everything you need to know about taxis. Here's one item. What should you do when a cabbie tells you his credit card machine is broken? This is advice that every taxi passenger needs one time or another today, because unfortunately, and I will say it, to the drivers that are here, you know that your colleagues do this. All too often, a taxi driver will say, "Oh, the credit card machine is broken," when it really isn't. We want that credit card capability to be available to every passenger without the driver trying to discourage it. That's what this change will accomplish. We are also changing the way that gasoline is handled, if the industry wishes. At the option of the fleet or the garage, the fleet will have the opportunity to pay for gasoline. Really what this does is that as more fuel-efficient cars are phased in to the fleet, replacing the Crown Victorias, this enables the fleet and the driver to share in that benefit created from the fuel efficiency. Less gas is consumed. This way, the gas savings, some of it can be realized by the fleet, some of it realized by the driver. It's fair and it's equitable. And finally, the item that I think has proved most controversial is the treatment of Dove operators. A huge and important segment in this industry are Dove, so-called Dove driver-owned vehicle operators, where the medallion is leased on its own to a driver who then is responsible for his or her own vehicle. And we have heard for years that the current lease cap level of $800 a week or $842 a week for a hybrid is too low and will endanger the Dove segment. Indeed, we had at both of our hearings on this item, on these proposals, we had repeated testimony that those lease caps are routinely ignored and violated. And I know Commissioner Jonai, Commissioner Marino, you have each called me to task for our lack of adequate enforcement on lease caps. And I am here to say I agree with you. I hear what you're saying. You are right. We do need better enforcement. And I want to assure you that going forward, we will be enforcing these lease caps. They will be followed. And one of the reasons, and I do have some sympathy for the Dove operators that...
I don't believe I contacted you about enforcement.
Well, I was just at the hearing 2 hearings ago. It was a comment that you made that there's not enough enforcement. And anyway, but whether you think so or not, I certainly do think so. And
I want to clarify that for the record.
That we are going to do that, and I want to assure people we now have just one. I'll be honest, we've had only one person devoted to lease cap enforcement. We are bulking that up. We will be adding at least 2 people with that as their portfolio. We are in conversations with other law enforcement agencies who have more resource and really more expertise. And we are committed, I want to assure all the commissioners, that our rules must be enforced. So you can vote on a lease cap knowing that it is a real number and not just a piece of paper. Now, I want to say, there's been, the last point I'll make on this is, I know I have heard from some in the Dove sector on the owner side that the proposed rule is a cut and is going to hurt them. I just want to make sure we understand what the numbers are. The current lease cap rate is $800 or $842 a week. $800 for a regular, $842 for a hybrid. This rule before us changes that to $1,072 a week for a regular car, $1,114 for a hybrid. That's an increase of $272 a week. Now, if someone wants to say not enough, that it should be more, understand that, and you have every right to do it. But you cannot honestly say it is a cut. I'm not so good at math, but 1,072 is greater than 800, and 1,114 is greater than 842. So if people want to argue about is it far enough, fair enough. But there really cannot be argument about is it a cut or an increase. So with that, I'm going to recommend that rather than have 2 sets of comments, since these issues really are interrelated, why don't we have commentary on both rules and then we will hold the votes. The first vote is on the fare rule before us.
So before the commission this morning is a proposed rule to increase taxi fares. The rule appeared in the city record on June 8th. The deadline for written comments was July 9th, and a public hearing was held on July 9th. The transcript of the hearing was made available to the public on the TLC website on July 10th. All comments received were submitted to the commissioners for their review, and based on the comments received, the following revisions were made to the rule that appeared in the city record. First, the provision that appeared in the fare rules prohibiting the deduction from drivers' receipts of a 5% credit card transaction fees was deleted from the proposed fare rules and added to the proposed lease cap rules. And two, a new requirement was added for a biannual review of lease rates and fare rates to occur every odd number year. Okay, I'm going to go through the commissioners in a roll call fashion, and you have an opportunity to speak and then to respond whether you vote yes or no for the fare rule.
It's almost noon. Good morning. It's still morning, close to noon. This whole industry, including drivers and all stakeholders, and the passengers are affected by today's decision. But I truly believe that today we were presented with a once-in-a-generation opportunity to what has been wrong for too long. Finally, New York City taxi drivers will be given a fair and decent wage for their hard work. But even more importantly, we've moved forward on a systemic change in the way future rates are charged and set. With today's vote, the stakeholders will never again face an 8-year period without a raise, and the passengers will get the quality and safe service that they deserve. And with that, I vote yes to the rate increase.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jonah, how do you vote on the fare rule? Yes? Okay, sorry about that, I was talking. Commissioner Carone?
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, the fare rule, which one are we voting on? The one presented this morning or the one that we had prior to this morning? So Mr. Commissioner John's commentary just reflected the process for fare changing is changing, and I'm not sure what he's talking about.
That I know that this is, again, I know that this is an issue that people feel very strongly about. People's livelihoods are affected. I'm going to insist that every person in the room be courteous. I don't want to hear commissioners applauded or booed. They work extremely hard. They've put hours and hours and hours for no pay into every meeting that we do, and this one in particular. So I'm going to insist that people be courteous. I will ask people to leave if there is discourtesy. I'm sorry. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was saying, prior to the commentary and testimony you heard on May 31st, I've asked the scheduled speakers to be mindful of the criteria that I believe the Commission must follow, in considering whether or not a fare increase is warranted, and if so, how much. And that section of our rules, which is given authority by the City Charter, is Section 5204 of our rules. And while listening to the testimony on the 31st and receiving the written commentary thereafter, I try to keep my mind focused on that section of the law so I can make an objective determination on a very difficult vote. Since then, the press has essentially framed the question of whether or not the drivers deserve a raise. I think I was even asked that question by some reporters, and that's a very good question. However, it's not the end of the analysis. The question is more of is it a philosophical one, or is it one that allows us the authority to make such a determination? So the first question when asked whether or not a fare increase is warranted, the first issue is, well, do we have the authority to do so? And if so, where is that authority written and where is that authority codified? So looking at Section 5204, which is the governing authority, and I'll just read here, it says the powers and duties with respect to rate setting, Commission will prescribe, revise, and regulate reasonable rates of fare. Goes on in section 3 to say, when determining rates of fare, we may consider all relevant factors. However, including the following, and it goes on to list 9 items: the time and distance of travel, the character of the service provided, the gross revenue derived from operation, the net return derived from operation, the expenses of operation, including the income of drivers or operators, the return on capital actually expended, and the need to reserve income for surplus and contingencies, the number of passengers transported, the effect of fare on the public in relation to the fares for other forms of public transportation, and the fare and practice with respect to similar services in other cities in the United States. So looking at 5204, which in my mind governs this analysis, it's not whether or not one segment of a private industry deserves a raise or not. Well, that's extremely important, and the answer to that is yes, of course. But looking at this objectively, and looking at the evidence presented from 31st on, I do not believe the 9 criteria, looking at it in its totality, has been met. Looking at it in its totality, you see it speaks to the passenger public and the service type of service. Will the service increase, and will it be a better passenger experience by a fare increase? Looking at the operations and looking at the drivers as a whole, which this is a symbiotic relationship. And as a whole, I do not believe evidence before us has been met to increase the fare. So my vote is no on 5204 grounds. I also am voting no on another ground. Because before me, just handed several minutes ago, is a new version of this proposal. I believe that the public is entitled to commentary. I believe the capital requirements dictate so, and I believe the vote is premature because the rules as written are substantive changes, and I do not believe compliant with CAPA. So on 2 grounds, my vote is no.
Got it. I look at this issue very simple. Have operating costs for the taxi garage gone up since the last fair 8 years ago? And the bottom line is, yes, those costs have gone up. All business costs have gone up in the past 8 years. To say otherwise is just nonsense. So, if the costs of the operating taxi garages have gone up, and the only way the garages can meet those costs is for us to increase the lease rate, then very simply, we need to approve a lease cap. I do not know what the right number is, but I know it isn't 0. This proposal will not permit taxi fleets to meet their costs. It will probably reduce their revenue even more. And what we eventually see is a decline in service to the public. We cannot allow this to happen. We are here to protect the riding public. And we are here to make sure and the many segments of the industry are treated fairly. I'm asking the chairman to give us a proposal that is fair. This proposal is not fair. Therefore, I'm voting no on the lease cap proposal. Under the fare increase proposal, there is no question in my mind that the drivers deserve a fare increase. Everyone agrees on that. We are the hardest working people in New York City as far as I'm concerned, and it has been too long, if you ask me. But this industry is not made up of drivers. There are the leasing agents, the fleets, and the garages. Together, these different groups provide New Yorkers with yellow taxi service, and all segments of the industry need an increase. This should not be complicated. I've been on a commission for many years, and in the past, we looked at the data and made up a decision. The proposal to give everything to the drivers is lopsided, and it will backfire, and they end up hurting drivers, owners, and the riding public in the end. I cannot vote against a fare increase because I like the drivers. I cannot vote against a fare increase because, like I said, the drivers deserve it. but I am compelled to abstain from voting on this proposal because it is not balanced and is not fair. Drivers have waited 8 years for a fair increase, and I believe the petition for a fair increase was submitted over 2 years ago. I don't buy the argument that we don't have time to get this right. I am asking the chairman to go back to the drawing board, get this right, get us a fair and lease cap package that I can vote on. And I am sure we can accomplish this over the summer and vote again in September. Abstain.
Commissioner D'Arcy?
It's been just over a year that I joined my fellow commissioners on this commission, and I've had the pleasure of participating in some significant votes in that short time. I will say that I am particularly proud that I am able to participate in this vote today. I think that there is overwhelming evidence that a fair increase for taxi drivers is warranted. Indeed, I don't believe that there can be any legitimate dispute that a fair increase is long overdue. Importantly, I also believe that it's important that this fair increase go to the very drivers for whom we are seeking to have their pay raised, which hasn't been raised since 2006. That this proposed rule will also allow for health care for the drivers leads to the singular conclusion in my mind that this is the right thing to do. I must turn now, though, to the issue of the lease cap. I'm persuaded that along with the fare increase, it is important and indeed it is necessary to provide for an increase in the lease cap with respect to the Dove model. I think that the Dove model is important to this industry. I think it's important to the city. I think it's important to New Yorkers who ride in the cabs every day. I think also that failing to increase the lease cap with respect to the Dove model would jeopardize the very existence of that segment of our industry. I don't think that that's a risk that we can take. I wasn't initially persuaded that in fact the lease cap for the Dove model was warranted. And I want to thank the members from the Dove industry who provided me and other members of this commission with the information that we asked for to allow me to move from my position that I had taken about a month ago. That same information, however, was not provided, at least to me, with respect to the fleets. And as a result, my position with respect to the lease cap and the fleets has not moved. Because of all of these considerations, as a member of this commission and as a frequent passenger in yellow taxis, I am enthusiastically voting in favor of both the increase for the fare and as well for the lease cap.
So to clarify for the record, Commissioner D'Arcy, you are voting in favor of the proposed rule to increase the fare.
Yes.
Commissioner Weinshaw?
Thank you. I had the pleasure of being on this commission in 2004, which was the last time that we increased the fare. I truly believe that the time has come to increase the fare for the sake of the drivers. They deserve a livable wage. I'd just like to say that in 2004, we rolled up our sleeves, the commission, the drivers, the industry, to really iron out a deal that I think worked well for everybody. I am very concerned in terms of the industry as a whole, how they've acted in the last few years. I fear that this industry has become too litigious, and I would ask the industry to please set a new tone going forward. I am particularly proud to be able to vote on this health and disability fund. As I think people in this industry know, My father was a cab driver for 30 years. I remember when I was a young girl, he broke his arm and came home with a cast on his arm and said that he was still going to have to go out and work because he owed money on the loan on his cab. And even though it was against the law, my father has passed away now, so nothing will happen to him, he went out every day with that cast on his arm working because he knew he had to provide for his family. So I am particularly proud that this fund will be set up and that people like my father will no longer have to choose between their health and putting food on the table for their family. So, Mr. Chairman, I am voting yes on the fare increase and yes on the cap.
Thank you. Since the last fare increase, this commission has addressed driver income via the cost side, mainly by advocating for improved fuel-efficient vehicles in an attempt to mitigate the most variable expense to the driver, fuel. Now the time has come to address it from the revenue side. While no one is for higher expenses, including myself as a passenger, upon diligent analysis from staff here, I believe the fare increase is necessary. Via comparative analysis with other cities and also with the current MTA fare, it's justified to have the fare increase as presented before us. I'd like to thank staff and my fellow commissioners, and most importantly, I'd like to thank the drivers. I appreciate all that you do for New York City. You're a special breed, we all know it, and you're deeply woven into the fabric of the city. I expect you, the drivers, to provide the same level of enhanced service and commitment to New York City and the riding public. I emphatically vote yes for the fare increase.
Commissioner Polanco?
Clearly, this fare increase is necessary as the cost of living in the city of New York has had an exponential increase. And the earnings and profits of all those involved in this great industry have been diminished, while the cost of living, as I mentioned, and cost of operation has increased. A fare increase is the right thing to do. I'm also proud that for the first time in the history of New York City, drivers will have a health and disability fund. This is huge, and it's a tremendous benefit for the drivers. Although I would have liked to see the fare increase rule together with the lease cap rule to have been voted on and not separated for voting purposes, I'm voting yes for the fare increase.
Commissioner Marino?
One of the benefits of going last is I get the benefit of what everyone else had to say, my colleagues. And frankly, I agree with everyone here. I agree that a fare increase is necessary. I agree with Commissioner Darcy that there's overwhelming evidence that the drivers need one, that it's long overdue. I agree with everything my colleagues have said. I agree with the fact that the drivers deserve some type of health care. I'm a solo practitioner. I don't belong to any type of health care program, so I know what a burden that can be because I live it. I agree with all these things. I think the drivers deserve a raise, but unfortunately there's a but at the end of that statement for me. And that but is that as commissioners, our job is to regulate the entire industry. And that's not just the drivers, but it's the doves, the agents, the fleet owners, the garage owners, and the riding public. And while I want the drivers to have this raise, it works maybe 20%. I mean, I think they deserve it. But I think we have to take into account the entire industry, and I don't believe these rules, as drafted, are fair to the other aspects of the industries, particularly the fleet owners and the dove agents. There were some changes made recently, which very recently, as a matter of fact, in the last 48 hours, which also I think is in violation of the New York Administrative Procedure Act requirement for further public notice and hearing. I mean, I'm barely understanding these new changes, and I don't anticipate that everyone in the audience today understands them all or has had a chance to consider them and comment on them. So because of these additional changes and the fact that I don't think these rules as proposed are fair to everyone, I have to vote no on the fare increase at this time. And I'm very sorry I have to vote that way, but I don't think it's right to protect one segment of this industry and disregard other segments in the process. I believe, as Commissioner Root said, that there is a way to come to a mutually fair agreement where everyone feels satisfied. I don't think the rules as written today do that.
Commissioner Yasti?
For the reasons stated, I stated earlier, I vote yes on the fare increase. Council, will you please
The vote for the
report?
The vote in favor of the fare increase is 6. There are 2 noes and 1 abstention. With that, the proposed rules for a fare increase are approved.
Thank you, Mira. We will now please call the roll on the second set of rules before us, the lease cap proposals.
Next on the agenda the Commission is considering proposed rules to increase fleet lease caps to offset cost shifts and to increase Dove lease caps to reflect costs of the industry. These rules appeared in the city record for their review, and based on the comments received, the following significant revisions were made. The hybrid lease cap incentive for fleets and Doves was restored. The fleet lease cap was increased by $1. The rules were revised to permit under all 3 lease types of lease caps other transactions as long as they're recorded and not related to the vehicle lease. The requirement in the Dove medallion vehicle lease cap that the agent cover costs of repair was deleted. An option was added to cover collision coverage for the medallion vehicle Dove lease with a maximum rate of $50 per week. There was an increase in penalties for retaliation. We eliminated the requirement that the medallion-only lease rate can be charged to a driver who holds vehicle title. Up to 3 drivers are allowed on a Dove lease. And also, to get a vehicle medallion lease was restricted to a conditional purchase. The reference to leases was deleted. The time period for a vehicle medallion lease was limited to 3 years. And that concludes the revisions to the lease cap rules.
I move to amend Chairman Yasky proposed lease cap rule and move to table the whole lease cap rule for September vote, as I have serious issues with the credit surcharge section, the lease cap rate section, as well as the new lease cap rule in respect to the Dove industry. As such, I move to table the rule for a September vote, and let me be clear, it is to place the rule for a vote and not to be discretionary.
Okay. Commissioner, I understand. Let's now call the roll on the motion to table. Commissioners, I'm going to recommend a no vote on this motion. While I understand the intent behind it, I do feel that a great deal of work and effort has been put into this. I think it's ready. I think the issues have been resolved as well as they can be, and that further delay, while I think would be unlikely to result in further support from any of the folks in the public, and would just delay implementation of these much-needed changes. So I'm recommending a no vote on the motion to table.
I like to second it, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Jonai?
And Commissioners, we will have an opportunity also to speak on the rule itself, assuming we do vote on it. So, but if you wish, you can speak on the motion to table.
Based on the commitments and negotiations that have gone on over the last few days, I will say no.
Commissioner Carone?
I'm going to speak to the rule itself because my reasoning to support Commissioner Polanco's motion is the same reason why I would vote no on the underlying lease cap proposal. Up until an hour and a half ago, because of substantive changes and disagreements as to the proposed rule, this rule was still being worked on and not going to a vote. The new proposed rule was handed to the Commission approximately 45 minutes ago, which I think is a flagrant violation of the New York City Administrative Procedures Act. So I think tabling it, allowing the public to comment on it, and allowing us all a chance to reflect on that commentary is prudent and is also lawful. So because I believe the vote as presented is unlawful, pursuant to New York City Charter 1043, I enthusiastically support Commissioner Polanco's motion.
Commissioner Arut?
I realize I was ahead of myself before, but I certainly will read this again to get into the book. I look at this issue very simple. Have operating costs for the taxi garage gone up since the last fare increase 8 years ago?
Excuse me, Commissioner Arut, I just want to clarify for you, before you now is a motion on whether or not to table
Table it.
the vote on the lease cap.
I table it.
Commissioner D'Arcy?
I vote no.
Gee.
No.
Commissioner Weinshaw?
No.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
No.
Commissioner Polanco? Commissioner Marino?
Yes.
With that, the motion is denied. There are 3 in favor and all others opposed.
I'm sorry, I think it's 4 in favor, but
4 in favor.
and 5 opposed. So, Mira, would you call the roll on the underlying rule?
Commissioner Jonah?
Based on the commitments and negotiations, I vote yes.
Commissioner Crone?
No.
Commissioner Arut?
No.
Commissioner D'Arcy?
Yes.
Commissioner Yaski?
Yes.
Commissioner Weinshaw?
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes.
Commissioner Polanco?
No.
Commissioner Marino?
No.
And with that, a vote of 5 in favor, the lease cap rules are adopted.
Commissioners, I know that it is now 12:05, and I know at least one or more commissioners may be out of time. And just to tell you what the rest of the agenda is for those that are able to stay or not illuminated, and 2 lights on either side that say off-duty that can be illuminated or not illuminated with a simple medallion number, and if it's lit, if it's illuminated, it means that the taxi would be available. If it's not illuminated, the taxi is not available. It's going to go to make the system a little clearer for passengers. We're not voting today, rather we are having a public hearing. Mr. Chowdhury, you have the honor and burden of being the first witness.
So many drivers fall ill from this job, have to work injured, having chemotherapy sessions. The idea that taxi drivers, the workforce of 90% immigrants have health care and disability on this job is a joy that is just unspeakable. We've suffered for so long. People have lost incomes by 25% in the past 6 years. We finally have the chance to go back to a livable income. We finally have the leases all under regulation, a level playing field where for years only the drivers were under regulation and the companies were not. Because of the vote today, everybody will have to follow the rules, not just the drivers, but those who break the rules on drivers' backs will also be prosecuted. It's a triumph for a workforce of 50,000 men and women who suffer and struggle so much. The idea that taxi drivers will have livable incomes and a health and disability fund and the right, an equal legal right in this industry will forever change the status quo in this industry for a better future for generations of drivers.
Do you feel like you slaved the lives a little bit? I mean, there was a lot, the meeting started over an hour late, there was a lot of pinstripes in the hall with the commissioners.
It's a bunch of suits and it's us. We just defeated the 1%. We don't have their money, we don't have their lobbyists, we don't have their PR people. All we have is truth and justice and the workers that struggle every single day. And today is evidence that working people can still win in this society. This is a good day for the working class as a whole. I mean, the taxi industry, the medallion lobby, is one of the most powerful corporate lobbies in this city, without a doubt. We were up against so much money, and all we had was ourselves. And we beat them. We beat them fair and square. We compromised, we negotiated in good faith. We gave up things, you know? We were not unreasonable at the table. We were fair-minded. What we sought was justice, and today in these halls, we have finally found it.
Is the flat fare of the flat payment now $10 instead of $9 for the credit card fees? What else changed?
Look, this was not like a slam dunk. There are things that we had to compromise at the negotiating table. But you have to understand, we're independent contractors. We're not even guaranteed the right to bargain at the table by the federal labor laws. We were able to negotiate, and as a result, the working conditions will take a step forward for tens and thousands of workers in this industry.
And so next year, they'll be considering garage fees again, but you have maybe a year off.
You know, the struggle never ends, but today is a day of celebration, and that's all we're going to focus on.
Yeah.
I want to thank all the members of the commission that stood with the drivers. You know, I want to thank Chairman Yaski for his leadership, his unrelenting, uncompromising leadership. I want to thank, you know, Commissioner Jonai for being our critical fifth vote, who was the one that made this happen for the drivers.
He's going downstairs.
He's going downstairs. So I definitely need, but can you grab him really quickly before we go in there? So you want to...
Hi. En la década de los 90 y después pasé a ser taxista amarillo y hasta la fecha sigo siendo taxista amarillo y estoy muy orgulloso de ser taxista de muchos años. I don't think there's not going to be a particular impact economically to any garage, to any broker, or to any fleet. The impact is simply morally. They have to learn to respect the hard-working people in New York City. They have to learn to respect the taxi drivers. They have a titanic amount of money in their accounts, and nothing is going to change. Nothing at all. They will continue to provide a service to the city of New York the way they're supposed to. The same way we cab drivers wake up every day to serve the city of New York City, they also have to wake up every day and be sure that that service continues to be in place. One thing I assure you is that with a 70% increase, definitely drivers in this time are being victorious here in New York City. And I hope that this victory that happens here in New York City will make echo in other metropolitan cities in the United States. And I strongly believe the American Federation of Labor will push for this movement to continue and to make sense for all the people across the United States that change is coming, change for the hard-working people here in the United States.
NYTWA. Don't worry about the old bag. We buy for the new bag. Don't worry about it.
I bought it on my honeymoon. I need that back.
Now you should go. Now we know we just have a hot. Yeah.
I'm sorry, crying like a baby.
You did it! You did it! You did it! Come on, man. One more hug. You know how to break them. Now they know who they're dealing with. Oh boy! Oh, show.
We got it!
Now you got it.
that would happen one time.
Thank you. We did it. We did it.
No more capping. So what do you gain over? My rent since the last time it's tripled the amount. I have to pay three times as much. You know what? The cab driver gets
offices and explaining the reality of life, we didn't have the votes. So
but without your commitment, it will be also not possible.
yeah, right. Doesn't get that far. But Bay to Bay and all of you kind of earned it. So
without you, without both of you,
all of you earned it. So feel good.
Thank you.
So you take our salute. I want to thank you for your great presentation. We gotta say, driver.